Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss what has been actually the biggest political story to come out of Downing Street this year. This is despite it being the year of Brexit, and it's got nothing to do with Brexit, and despite the year of the serious pandemic, and it's got nothing to do with the pandemic. It is the eviction of Dominic Cummings and how none of it really makes any sense at all. But first of all, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So there was a little bit of a news storm on Friday evening. Sorry it's taken an extra day, but I knew nothing about it until yesterday. I took Friday evening off completely. I wasn't even browsing the internet to have a movie night with my partner. So we're watching the last two Harry Potter films. And at the same time, Dominic Cummings is getting his marching orders, sort of, and skulking out of number 10 with box in hand. First of all, it is important to remember that this isn't a sacking. Dominic Cummings has not been fired. He resigned last week, and he's still serving out that notice. He is still doing the job that he was doing. He still has the same position. He's not even been put on gardening leave. He's still doing the job. He's just not going to be doing it from Downing Street. He's working remotely. But that's big enough, because that will presumably mean he's had his Downing Street and Whitehall passes removed, as well as other security clearances. But he is still going to be working on things that involve wasting yet more vast sums of public money, contributing to his so far completely cocked up COVID strategy. But the sight of Dominic Cummings walking out of the main door of 10 Downing Street with a box will be amusing for many. But it is also baffling. It's just as baffling as the spectacle itself, because there'll be many cheering his departure, of course. But I have to confess myself to being very confused. That being said, it's happened. We may as well savour it for a moment before starting to try and work out what's going on. Now, I've said this before and I will say it again. When the Daily Star, which for those who don't know is basically, it's not so much a newspaper as an adult comic. But when the Daily Star decides to do politics, it does it very well. Their headline was pretty good. Take your box and sod off. But what was occurring to me is, why did he go out of the front door at number 10? He knew there'd be the assembled press there. This, for him, this is a man with a huge ego, absolutely massive ego. And yet there he is going out of the door of number 10. Now, this was really interesting. I do not believe a man like Dominic Cummings, whose ego is too big to accept that he's ever been wrong, because that's what caused the big problem at Durham, which we're going to talk about as well, would do that, because it's a humiliating image of him that was all over the front pages, every single newspaper as far as I could tell, all over it. I think Boris Johnson was really pissed off with him. I think he's been told that's the way he's going out. He wasn't allowed to go out of any other exit, because that was a major humiliation. But anyway, there it goes. And there's going to be a lot of discussions based on this, because this is massive. Bear in mind, this isn't just an advisor going. It's not even the Prime Minister's chief advisor going. This is Dominic Cummings, who was running the show. That's quite clear. He was telling Johnson what to do, and Johnson was doing it. All the way through this year, Johnson has completely relied upon Dominic Cummings. This is as earth-shaking as the Prime Minister, suddenly without notice, announcing their resignation and with immediate effect. It's that big. And what I want to focus on in this video would be a couple of elements. One is, how does it make sense for Johnson to suddenly banish Cummings now, when he was willing to be his puppet for so long? And two, are there going to be any personal consequences for any of the vote leave ministers, including Boris Johnson, after they've taken out those who may have embarrassing revelations about them? But the banishment, first of all. So the way it's been billed is Johnson stood by Cummings when he clearly broke the law in Durham during the first lockdown. But now that, and what's prompted it apparently is Dominic Cummings said something unkind about Boris Johnson's fiancee. Oh, so Dominic Cummings can completely wreck the government's credibility, make Boris Johnson look personally foolish, break the rules, completely undermine confidence in the government. Because this second lockdown, it has to be said, it's very obvious compliance with it is much lower than it was in the first. and Johnson will stick by him. But oh, say something mean about Carrie and you're gone. What's that about? But let's look at Durham again, because this was the big one, wasn't it? Boris Johnson stuck by Cummings so much that he even put political pressure on the police in Durham not to properly investigate. The police did announce that Dominic Cummings had broken the rules, but they weren't going to take up any following action. And and he's also stuck by Cummings despite every single, and I mean every single policy decision of his being wrong, every single one. Conservatives despair at the huge number of U-turns that Johnson has had to make this year, but those U-turns came as a result of following Cummings' advice. This way of trying to deal with the exams situation this year was Cummings. The COVID strategy, Cummings. Cummings was installed himself. He installed himself into the SAGE meetings, the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies, to put a leaning on what that advice was going to be. He has decided everything that has happened this year. Now, Boris Johnson may have appreciated Cummings' campaigning work during the Brexit referendum, as indeed do many Conservative Brexit supporting MPs. But I have to ask, of what value has Cummings been to Johnson since? Some credit him with the similar campaigning techniques of 2019, the general election, but I don't think that had very much to do with Cummings. Cummings wasn't actually in charge of that campaign. He was there and he was advised and he was involved, but we don't necessarily know that if Cummings wasn't involved that they wouldn't have won, because they had different people in charge of that campaign. While Johnson has been Prime Minister, I can honestly not think of a single thing that Cummings has contributed to that has been of any value to Johnson. I mean, this is now just considering from the other political side. Obviously, Dominic Cummings has done a massive amount of damage to the country. But you think about it from the selfishness of Johnson's point of view. At the same time, you understand if Johnson gets some selfish benefit from Cummings, you understand him keeping him on staff. I honestly do not think I can think of a single thing he's done well. And, so we've got the scenario where Boris Johnson is stuck by this serial cock-up merchant, despite him costing the Conservative Party in the polls, which Conservative MPs were not happy about. And yet he gets rid of him just because he said something nasty about Johnson's fiancee. I don't get it. I mean, that would be odd behaviour for anyone. For anyone. But we know that Johnson doesn't have any loyalty to anyone other than himself. Yes, I don't doubt that he has a great regard for Carrie Symonds and listens to her. Absolutely. But we know from past experience with his past partners, he has no loyalty towards them. His loyalty is to himself. Now let's consider that Durham episode again. So it was the most famous, but also it was the most remarkable. The reason it was so remarkable is not just because Johnson refused to sack Cummings, but because he allowed Dominic Cummings to completely take the piss. Now, if Dominic Cummings, on being found out, had apologised and said he wasn't thinking straight, he could have played that caring father role like he tried to and said he just acted on foolish impulse. Do you know what? People like me would still be saying, well, hang on a minute, Conservative ministers forced and applauded the resignation of other senior officials when they transgressed those rules. Why are they accepting that Dominic Cummings should stay on with an apology? But do you know what? The rest of the country would have let it slide. I wouldn't have done, the apology would have been phony, but politically it wouldn't have been a big hit. A lot of people would have gone, right, they've said it's wrong, he's admitted it's wrong, let's move on, shall we? And it wouldn't have been a massive blow in the polls for the Conservatives or for Johnson personally. Now, I don't know if Dominic Cummings was ever asked to apologise. I don't know if Boris Johnson went to him and said, do you know what, Dom, the best thing to do would be to apologise to calm the round down. And he just said, no, I'm not doing that. But what is absolutely clear, whether or not Johnson wanted him to apologise or not, Dominic Cummings was not of the mind to do that. Again, that ego wouldn't let him. He ordered cabinet ministers to back his actions. When that didn't work, he arranged a press conference in the Rose Garden in Downing Street to double down on his nonsense. He had no authority and no right to do that. That is for the Prime Minister to do press conferences at times. It is not for an official. But Johnson allowed it. Boris Johnson and the Conservatives, as a result of their behaviour over that one episode alone, suffered a catastrophic loss of credibility. It was quite clear at this point that Boris Johnson simply could not accept that he could do without Cummings, because the political pressure, even within his own party, to get rid of Cummings at that point was fierce. Never seen anything like it. And as I say, at the time, people were going, oh, what the hell has Dominic Cummings got on Johnson? What has he got on him? There was also the possibility, which I thought was more likely, that Johnson just genuinely thought that Cummings was a tactical genius. But I don't know which it really was. All I can say is that for Boris Johnson to allow Cummings to have gotten away with that, knowing full well the political damage it was doing to him, it was going to turn the country against him and his government, as indeed it did. Johnson was joining himself politically at the hip to Cummings. And Johnson carried on following his advice. He kept on following his advice. It didn't matter how badly wrong it went, he kept following it. You know, he was like Pinky to Cummings's brains. Every night, the plan to take over the world. Every night, it was a complete disaster. Do you know what? Pinky's still there going, what are we going to do tomorrow night, brains? Now, we're supposed to believe that Boris Johnson has finally had enough and wanted Cummings and his whole Vote Leave crew gone. I don't get what's changed. I don't believe that, really. What I can believe is that a different faction have now got control of Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson is a puppet. He's been a puppet from the start. The puppet master was Dominic Cummings. It is now possible that Carrie Symonds and a coalition of Conservative MPs has now taken over the puppet strings. You know, there's no way Johnson has himself come to this conclusion. Because whatever Johnson knows now, he knew then. Nothing has changed about, you know, the fact that, oh, Dominic Cummings has no regard for anyone but himself. Yeah, we knew that. That Dominic Cummings has no regard for the Conservative government's credibility. We knew that as well. All of what we know now, we knew then. And so did Johnson. Now, David Davis, who's an influential Conservative MP, said that Johnson had acted decisively. No, he hasn't. Acting decisively would have been taking action when Cummings was costing the government that credibility. That was over half a year ago. As actions go, this is dithering even for Johnson. Normally, an advisor who embarrasses the government, even one that, you know, even on one occasion, would just instantly lose their job. They're gone. Now, let's say they were a particularly valued advisor and the indiscretion was the sort of thing that could blow over fairly quickly. You might warn them, you'd publicly say they were in the wrong, you apologise, they've apologised, tell them to be more discreet and then, you know, carry on. Nobody in the history of British politics has caused even half the embarrassment to the government that Cummings has and been kept on in post. So then you think, so what are the consequences going to be? Well, it will be of interest to see if Cummings acts out of spite over this. Will he reveal embarrassing secrets about Johnson or indeed any other ministers who did not stick by him over this? It might have wider implications for the Vote Leave brigade as well. Johnson has given nice jobs to everyone involved in that campaign, thick as thieves they are, or were. So if he feels he can get rid of the officials in Vote Leave, maybe he's going to be getting rid of some of the ministers like Priti Patel as well. But there are going to be an awful lot of things to have to discuss over this. This was just the beginning. This is going to be a huge story. And at the moment, we don't even know that much. But those are my initial thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.